She didn't plan to follow it. The dog had just appeared dusty, limping, and oddly focused, like it was looking for something it had already lost. Olivia Torres figured it would wander off like all strays do. But instead, it trotted straight toward the edge of town, tail high, like it knew something. When she finally caught up, it was standing at the mouth of an abandoned garage no one had entered in decades. What she found inside didn't just shake loose a memory, it woke up the entire town. Before we dive in, let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if stories like this stir something in you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode might just be even more powerful than this one. The first time Olivia saw the dog, it was standing in the middle of Main Street like it owned the road. No collar, no tags, just ribs poking through a patchy coat and eyes that didn't blink when her truck rolled past. She figured it was another stray left behind like everything else. In Fairhaven, old tractors, broken mailboxes, rusted swing sets. People didn't come here to stay. They passed through, if they came at all. But the dog didn't move, just stood there, head cocked, watching her like it recognized her from some forgotten place. She braked slowly, half from instinct, half from curiosity. The dog trotted off without urgency, cutting between a fallen fence and the edge of the field behind her shop. Olivia sat in the cab, engine idling, lips pressed tight. It wasn't the first stray she'd seen in this town, but something about the way it moved, the way it paused just long enough to make eye contact. Before slipping out of view, it didn't feel random. She turned the engine off, grabbed her shop rag from the seat beside her, and stepped out. The air was dry, the kind that cracked lips and peeled paint. She tucked the rag into her back pocket and followed the path the dog had taken. Past the rusted-out tractor that no one had touched since the last harvest season. Past the drainage ditch where kids used to float soda bottles like pirate ships. And then, beyond the clearing, she saw it. The garage. It sat hunched and sun-bleached at the far edge of the field, tucked behind a patch of dry brush and forgotten fencing. Most people didn't even know it was there. Just a tin roof relic with broken windows and weeds tall enough to hide a motorcycle. Olivia had lived in Fairhaven her whole life, and she'd only heard whispers about it. Something about an old city contract, a failed public works project, a fire that never made the papers. But here it was. And that dog was already nosing at the door like it belonged. "Hey," she called out softly, more to herself than the mutt. The dog looked back at her once, then slipped inside through a half-collapsed side panel. Olivia exhaled, glanced down at her boots, then stepped onto the cracked concrete. It moaned beneath her weight, like it remembered being walked on. Inside, the garage smelled like rain that never came dust, motor oil, and something older. Shafts of light cut through holes in the roof, spotlighting piles of forgotten tools and parts that hadn't seen a wrench in years. But in the center of the room, wrapped in heavy canvas and swallowed by shadow, was something big. The dog sat beside it, panting quietly. Watching her, Olivia took a step forward, her boots echoing across the concrete like she'd entered a cathedral. The air inside the garage was still, heavy with the kind of silence that felt earned, like time itself had settled here and refused to leave. Dust floated through beams of light that spilled from the collapsed ceiling, catching on old workbenches, coiled extension cords, and metal shelves bent from the weight of long-forgotten tools. A vise was still clamped onto the edge of a bench, gripping nothing but time. The dog sat obediently beside the covered object, tail still, ears forward. It didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't wag, just stared at her, as if waiting for her to remember something she'd never known. She crouched down slowly, running a hand along the edge of the tarp. The fabric was thick, almost canvas-like, and stiff from years of settling dust. Her fingers found the corner and gave a gentle tug. It resisted, then gave. The sound it made, like opening a sealed tomb, made her shiver. Underneath was metal, rounded edges, vents, curves that suggested machinery, but not anything she recognized. Olivia pulled back more of the tarp until the shape revealed itself. 4 wheels, heavy chassis, tinted windows nearly opaque with grime, and mounted panels on the side solar or something like it. The thing looked like a cross between an ambulance, a generator, and a military prototype. She had never seen anything like it. "What the hell are you?" she whispered. The dog barked once. Not loud, not urgent, just a confirmation. She stepped back and scanned the garage again. Tucked into the corners were cabinets, some sealed, some rusted open. On a wall behind her, the peeling remnants of a blueprint hung by thumbtacks. She walked over, heart pounding, and leaned in. The edges were brittle and stained, but the title block still read clear. Project Havenlight, Emergency Autonomous Response Unit. Stamped underneath, Fairhaven Municipal Infrastructure Division. Dated August 17, 2003. 22 years ago. Her breath caught. She'd been 5. She remembered the year. That was when the floods came. The ones that shut down the lower part of town for nearly a month. Power out. Water undrinkable. No one really talked about how close the town came to being unlivable after that. Most people just rebuilt what they could and moved on. Or moved away. But here it was. Hidden in plain sight. A machine that looked like it could generate power, carry supplies, maybe even desalinate water with the right modifications. Whatever it was built for emergencies, and built here. Then buried under time and silence. And now a stray dog had led her to it. She turned back toward the machine. Walked to the driver's side. The door was locked, but the handle gave a little when she pulled. It would open if she forced it. She looked down at the dog. "You really want me to open this?" The dog stood and walked a slow circle around the vehicle, then stopped, waiting. Olivia tightened her grip on the handle, and pulled. The driver's side door creaked open like it hadn't been touched since the day it was sealed. Dust spiraled in the sunlight as she leaned in. The interior smelled of rust, old plastic, and something faintly electric like the ghost of ozone still clung to the seats. The dashboard was wide, cluttered with analog dials and blinking LEDs, some of which still pulsed faintly when she brushed her hand across them. No keys, no ignition. Just a digital panel that flashed briefly before going dark again. The seat was molded for comfort, reinforced, like someone expected to be inside for a long time. Olivia stepped back and opened the rear door. It stuck. She braced herself, gave it a second pull, and the latch broke free with a snap that echoed through the garage. Inside was a compact command station equipment cases strapped down, a fold-out bench, sealed cabinets labeled medical supplies and power interface, and a mounted battery pack, with warning stickers so faded they looked like hieroglyphs. This thing wasn't just a vehicle. It was a mobile survival unit. She circled to the back. The rear doors opened like a vault, revealing a wide cargo space with retractable shelves, ventilation grills, and bolted-down toolboxes. Most of it was dusty and dead. But on the far wall, set in polished aluminum, was a recessed control panel labeled Emergency Activation Sequence. It had a key slot, and no key, she swore under her breath. Her mind was already racing. Someone had built this thing, designed it from scratch for the town, for Fairhaven. And then they abandoned it, or buried it, or maybe forgot it was here at all. But why? She walked back outside to get better cell reception. Nothing. No bars. She held her phone in the air, spun in a slow circle, and then froze when she caught sight of the dog again. It was pacing now. Not anxious, restless. Like it had finished its job and didn't know what to do next. "You brought me here," she said out loud. The dog looked at her, tongue out, tail wagging faintly. Then it trotted across the field and disappeared through a gap in the fence, heading in the direction of the old water tower. She didn't follow. Not yet. Instead, she turned back to the garage. Her eyes scanned the walls again. More blueprints, faded photographs pinned beside them. A man in his 60s, white lab coat, standing next to the very machine parked behind her. His name scribbled beneath in Sharpie. Elliot Granger, lead engineer. Another photo, this time of a town council group dated 2002. They all looked younger, optimistic, before everything fell apart. In the bottom right corner of the corkboard was a laminated sheet. A note, Prototype powered by solar array. Plus. Deep cycle reserve. No fuel required. Emergency deployment must be authorized by town administrator. She felt her chest tighten. Someone tried to save this town once. And now, maybe it was asking her to try again. Olivia spent the rest of the afternoon inside the garage, brushing away cobwebs, opening drawers, cataloging every scrap of information she could find. Each page, each wire, each faded schematic only deepened the mystery. The prototype wasn't just some government toy. It was a last-ditch solution for a problem everyone had chosen to forget. By dusk, she was seated on an overturned crate, elbows on her knees, staring at the machine like it might start talking. Her phone still had no service. It didn't matter. The questions were piling up faster than she could answer them. Why was this hidden? Why had no one mentioned it during the last blackout, the last storm, the last town council meeting where half the residents complained about failing infrastructure? She heard gravel crunching outside. Her breath caught, heart jumping for just a second until she recognized the lopsided gait of the man walking through the garage doors. "Olivia Torres," he said, tipping his cap. "Didn't think I'd find you in this place." She squinted at the outline. "Mr. Callahan?" He stepped into the light. George Callahan, retired electrician, former municipal contractor. More rust than bone in his joints these days, but sharp as a socket wrench when it counted. "I saw your truck. Figured no one else would be dumb enough to park that close to the edge of the bluff." He peered past her and stopped cold. His eyes landed on the prototype. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he let out a slow breath that sounded like 20 years of memory leaving his lungs. "Sweet hell. You found it. You knew about this." "I wired half of it," he muttered, stepping slowly toward the vehicle. "Back when the town still believed in big ideas." He circled it with reverence, hands brushing over the solar panels, the charging ports, the mounted emergency sirens. "We called it Haven Light. The mayor had this dream after the 3 floods. Said Fairhaven needed a backup system, a rolling shelter. Something that could light up the town if the grid went down. Even had heating coils for winter outages. The whole 9 yards. Why didn't it go public?" Callahan snorted. "Politics. Money dried up. The guy who designed it. Granger he passed before the last test run. Council tabled the project after that. Said it was too ambitious." He shook his head, eyes cloudy. "They built this place to store it, then just stopped coming. Like they were scared to admit they gave up." "Oh." Olivia leaned against the metal frame. "Could it still work?" Callahan shrugged. "Power cell's probably shot. Control module might be locked out. But if the circuits are good, and the panels still charge, maybe." A distant rumble shook the air. They both turned. Clouds were gathering on the horizon, dark, heavy, mean. "Forecast says it's just rain," he said. "Last time they said that, we lost half the grid." Callahan looked at her, then really looked at her. "You planning to fix it?" She nodded slowly. "I think I have to." The next morning, Olivia opened her shop like nothing had changed. She flipped the lights on, fed the shop cat, started the coffee pot that still coughed twice before breathing steam. But her mind wasn't in the carburetor she was rebuilding, or the invoice she had to print. It was back in that hidden garage, tracing blueprints with her eyes closed. Fairhaven had always been a town stuck in second gear. People didn't expect much here, just working utilities, quiet Sundays, and familiar faces at the diner. The last time anyone tried to fix something that mattered, it ended with empty promises and a council vote that no one attended. That was the pattern. Problems didn't get solved. They got paved over. The storm forecast was getting louder. The news called it a minor atmospheric disturbance. Locals weren't so sure. The sky had that bruise-colored tint that meant trouble was coming. By mid-afternoon, Olivia was back at the forgotten garage with a duffel bag full of tools, jumper cables, and a borrowed voltmeter. The dog was there before her, sitting in front of the vehicle like a sentinel. She couldn't bring herself to call it hers yet, but it was starting to feel like it knew her. She crawled under the frame first. The undercarriage was in surprisingly good shape. No major corrosion. Whoever had sealed this place had done it right. The deep cycle battery pack, though, stone dead. That was the first problem. She popped open one of the equipment panels and started tracing wires. Half the internal circuits had fused relays. She could fix them. The rest would need replacements. She had some back at the shop. She'd need more. A lot more. That night, she sat in the break room with a notebook open and hands stained black. She began making a list. Parts, wire gauges, solder points, estimates. No one was paying her for this. There was no client, no paycheck. But something inside her felt different. Not just motivated called. The next morning, she stopped by Callahan's place. He handed her a rusted box of tools before she even stepped inside. "If you're doing this," he said, "you're not doing it alone." Word spreads fast. In a town with one diner and no secrets. By Friday, 3 more people had stopped by the garage. The mayor's older brother, Walter, who used to do fabrication work before his eyesight, started to go, brought welding goggles and a set of replacement fuses. A high school senior named Mason showed up with a backpack full of solder wire and a heart that clearly just wanted to matter. Mrs. Ellerby from the library dropped off a dusty binder labeled Haven Light. Phase 3 specs and said nothing, just squeezed Olivia's hand and left. They didn't talk much, just worked. And through it all, the dog stayed close, quiet, watching, like it was making sure no one gave up this time. It started with just a few tools and a trickle of help. But soon, it felt like the town itself had begun to stir. Not loudly, not all at once. Just a quiet shifting, like a machine slowly waking after years of silence. Olivia never asked anyone to show up. She didn't post flyers or make calls, but every day, someone new would arrive at the edge of the garage, hesitant, curious, sometimes carrying nothing more than a memory. Mason became her shadow, picking up everything fast, eyes wide behind safety goggles, always hungry to learn. Walter spent hours rewiring the cabin interior, his fingers shaky but precise. Mrs. Ellerby returned with more blueprints she happened to find under a stack of 2006 budget reports. They were labeled Power Routing Redesign, Emergency Use Only. It was like the whole town had been waiting for someone to pick up where Granger left off. They cleaned out the workbenches, hung fresh light bulbs, marked up whiteboards with diagrams, voltage readings, checklists. The garage that once whispered of abandonment began to hum with energy circular saws, laughter, the buzz of soldering irons, even the soft clicks of the old analog meters flickering back to life. And always, the dog was there. Olivia started calling him Wrench. It fit. He'd curl up on the mat beside the prototype while they worked, tail thumping when she passed. No one knew where he came from. No one questioned why he stayed. He just belonged. One morning, as Olivia reinstalled a cleaned capacitor unit, the wind shifted, and the smell of wet ozone filled the air. She paused, sniffed, and turned to the open garage door. Clouds, dark and layered, were crawling over the ridge. "That's not just rain," Walter muttered, joining her side. She nodded. "We're not ready yet." But they kept going. Fastening, splicing, testing. They took short shifts, rotating in and out of the garage like a relay team. Even Father Morales, from the local church, stopped by with peanut butter sandwiches and asked if he could hold a flashlight or a prayer. The local hardware store owner, Hank, heard what was happening and opened his supply closet after hours. "Call it a donation," he said, placing a bin of copper terminals in Olivia's hands. "This town gave me everything. Least I can do is help you give something back." By nightfall, the prototype was 70% operational. The deep cycle backup battery replaced. The solar relay reconnected. The auxiliary floodlight array tested and functional. It still couldn't drive, but it could breathe. The screen lit up when Olivia flipped the main breaker. The hum that filled the room was low and strong, like a sleeping heart starting to beat again. But Olivia knew it was coming, and it wasn't going to wait for 100%. The sky turned the color of old bruises greenish, purple-edged, heavy with intent. Forecasts that once said light rainfall had upgraded to significant weather event. But anyone who'd lived in Fairhaven long enough could tell you that was just code for get your candles, get your buckets, and pray the transformers don't blow. By morning, cell towers were lagging, and the town's emergency alert system, old, neglected, blared once, then went silent. Olivia stood at the mouth of the garage, wind tugging at her sleeves, her hands wrapped in gauze from a bad solder burn 2 nights prior. Mason tightened a bolt on the rear frame, while Walter adjusted the voltage regulator they'd spliced together from spare parts and leftover dreams. No one said it out loud, but they all knew. This wasn't just a test anymore. Wrench stood alert near the front tire, nose in the air, tail stiff. Even he could feel it. The prototype, now openly referred to as the unit, was as close to ready as it would ever be. The solar panels had soaked up enough energy to trickle charge the emergency core. The communication relay was online, at least for short-range signals. Olivia had even rigged a bypass to the municipal grid, just in case the transformer near Main Street failed, which it would. It always did. The mayor called at noon. "Torres," he said, breathless. "I'm told you're working on some kind of backup system?" She glanced at the still dimming lights above her. "Working on it? It's not a guarantee. Nothing is anymore. Can it power the shelter? If the grid goes down, we'll get you lights, heat, and water pumps, but no Wi-Fi." He laughed nervously. "You have any idea what you're doing?" "Not really," she said, "but I'm doing it anyway." He paused. "That machine, we buried it for a reason." "I know," she replied. "But maybe that reason doesn't matter anymore." The call ended without a thank you. She didn't need one. By late afternoon, rain had started soft at first, then harder. The wind shifted. Water crept through the cracked pavement. Olivia looked around at the people in the garage. No one flinched. They just kept working. Walter lit the floodlights early. "Let's make sure the town can see us when they need to." Mrs. Ellerby arrived just before sundown, with 3 boxes of instant soup and a thermos of black coffee. She walked through the open doors, took one look at the prototype and whispered, "Granger would have cried." That night, lightning split the sky. The first transformer blew around midnight. Power across the east side of town blinked once, then died. The emergency shelter filled by 2:0 a.m. and at 2:17, with rain slamming sideways and the garage trembling in the wind, Olivia reached for the final switch. "Ready?" she asked. Everyone nodded, and she turned the power on. The lights didn't come on all at once. For a second, Olivia thought it hadn't worked, that all their hours and burns and late-night fixes had failed. But then, slowly, like dawn inching across the horizon, the floodlights hummed to life. First a flicker, then a pulse, then a full glow that filled the garage with a golden warmth that didn't belong in a storm like this. Outside, the wind howled. Trees bent like prayer flags. Rain slammed the ground in sheets, the kind that made it hard to breathe. And somewhere across town a second transformer popped, taking the north side with it. Fairhaven was going dark, except here. Inside the garage, the emergency panel on the prototype blinked green. Olivia checked the load, holding steady. The bypass lines were live. Power was flowing. The digital display on the backup reservoir showed the water pump engaging. Mason let out a quiet, "Whoa," under his breath. Walter crossed himself without irony. "Get it to the shelter," Olivia said. Now, they'd installed a tow rig just in case it couldn't move under its own power. The engine hadn't been tested yet. But when Olivia twisted the ignition override, the unit rumbled deep and uneven at first, then steadier. A low mechanical growl like something waking from a long coma. She climbed into the driver's seat, soaked from the rain, hands trembling. "You sure about this?" Walter shouted over the storm. "Nope." She shifted into drive. The unit rolled forward slow, but sure, like it had been waiting 2 decades for this exact moment. Wrench barked once and ran alongside, soaking wet, never straying far. Down the hill, across the gravel road, through floodwater already starting to rise. By the time they reached the shelter, An old high school gymnasium retrofitted with cots and lanterns. The parking lot was a mess of stalled cars, crying kids, and tired volunteers trying to make order out of chaos. Olivia pulled the unit to the side entrance, flipped the switch labeled Emergency Deploy. The side panel opened with a hiss, cables rolled out, ports clicked into place, and then light. The gymnasium buzzed back to life. Overhead fluorescents flickered and held. The sump pumps kicked in. Heat began flowing through the vents. The low whine of the air filtration system rose in the background. People started clapping not in celebration, but in disbelief. The mayor arrived 10 minutes later, coat inside out, eyes wide. "You got it working," he whispered. Olivia didn't answer. She was still gripping the steering wheel, soaked, shivering, staring at the blinking green lights across the dash. She only spoke when the backup panel displayed load-stable 9 hours power remaining. "We've got until morning," she said. "That's enough." The mayor looked at her, then at the machine. "Where the hell did this come from?" "Fairhaven," Olivia said. "We just forgot it." And somewhere inside the shelter, a child laughed. Dawn came slow, reluctant. The storm had passed, but the sky remained heavy, like it hadn't quite decided whether to let the sun through. Fairhaven woke up in fragments, cold houses, damp floors, silent phones. But at the shelter, the lights were still on. The heat still flowed, and the hum of the Haven Light unit still whispered a soft promise. "You're not alone." Olivia sat on the hood, soaked jacket draped over her shoulders, coffee mug cradled between blackened hands. Her fingers ached, her body screamed. But inside her chest was something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The shelter buzzed with quiet movement. Kids passed out apples and juice boxes. Volunteers checked on the elderly. Someone set up an old boom box and played a cassette of soft bluegrass that drifted into the fog like incense. And every so often, someone would stop by the machine not to touch it, not to ask questions, just to look, like they needed to see it was real. Walter stood beside her, hands in his coat pockets. "You know what this means, right?" She nodded. "We can't pretend we're helpless anymore." He smiled. Granger would have been proud. Mason approached, his hair wild, a wrench sticking out of his back pocket. "The grid's still down. No ETA." "Let it stay down," Olivia said. "For now, we've got light." She stepped inside the gym, and the crowd quieted. Not in a dramatic way, just a ripple of awareness, a nod of respect, the kind of silence that made room for something sacred. The mayor stood on the stage, eyes hollow from the sleepless night. He held up a radio that crackled with static. "Fairhaven," he said, voice raspy but steady. "We've got power at the shelter. We've got heat, clean water, and coffee that doesn't taste like boiled dirt." A few chuckles. He turned to Olivia, then motioned for her to come up. She shook her head. He insisted. Reluctantly, she walked to the front. Wrench followed, tail wagging. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, looking out over the faces of a town that had given up long ago. And now, in the glow of soft emergency lights, they were beginning to remember. "I didn't save anything," she said finally. "This machine was already here. This garage, these blueprints. It was all here. We just stopped looking." She paused. "Someone tried to save this town 20 years ago, and we let their work fade. But now we know better. We know. So next time something breaks, we don't bury it. We fix it." The shelter erupted not in a cheer, but in something better, a standing silence. Heads nodded, eyes welled. And the town of Fairhaven, for the first time in years, stood taller. Later, Olivia found herself back at the garage. She walked the perimeter slowly, fingers trailing along the metal siding. The garage wasn't just a building anymore. It was a heartbeat, and it was awake. Weeks passed. The storm became a memory. Power was restored. Streets were cleared. And Fairhaven changed. Not in big ways. There were still potholes, still complaints at town meetings, still burnt coffee at the diner. But something invisible had shifted. You could feel it in how people talked to each other. How they lingered a little longer in conversation. How, when someone mentioned the garage, Folks didn't look confused anymore, they looked grateful. Olivia didn't try to capitalize on any of it. She didn't build a website, didn't hang a banner. She kept fixing cars during the day and quietly working on the Haven light unit in the evenings, replacing rusted panels, installing a better regulator, prepping it for the next time. Because there would always be a next time, and when it came, they'd be ready. Wrench never left her side. He claimed a spot on an old shop blanket near the rear tire and stayed there, tail thumping softly every time she walked by. Olivia eventually built him a small bed from scrap insulation and an old flannel shirt. She never put a collar on him. He didn't need one. He already belonged to her, to the garage, to Fairhaven. Kids started showing up on Saturdays, not for repairs, but to learn. Mason, now practically her apprentice, helped set up small lessons how to change a tire, how to read a voltmeter, how to know when something broken was worth fixing. She called it Haven Light Sessions. It wasn't official, but people came anyway. And when Father Morales offered to bless the garage, no one laughed, because everyone knew it wasn't just a garage anymore. It was a place where light had returned. One afternoon, Olivia stood outside, watching as the mayor drove up with the town council trailing behind. No suits, no cameras, just a rusted pickup, a few lawn chairs, and a box of donuts. They asked if they could talk. She said sure. "We'd like to allocate funding," the mayor said, "to make this an official emergency response hub. You don't have to say yes." She thought for a long moment, then nodded. "Only if it stays Wooded Island." "And what's that?" "A place that remembers." They agreed. Later, Olivia hung a sign above the wide garage doors. Simple, sanded wood, painted by hand. The Haven Light Garage. Below it, in smaller script, "Built by hands that refuse to forget." That evening, she sat alone on the hood of the unit, Wrench curled beside her. The sunset painted the sky in streaks of copper and rose. Somewhere in the distance, a generator hummed. Kids laughed, and the town breathed easy. She looked out across the fields, wind brushing her face, and whispered, "We didn't just save the town, we remembered it." And with that, the garage that had once been buried under dust, silence, and failure became the beating heart of a community learning to hope again. Not because they waited to be saved, but because someone followed a stray dog and said yes to trying.